Hello and welcome back to the Whaling Hour. Apologies. Last week we weren't able to stream because of our internet connection, which is still pretty bad. AT&T is working on replacing some lines, but they're not doing a great job. So our streaming is still kind of intermittent. It's mostly good, but then sometimes it'll drop out and there'll be like half second of latency. But I'm hoping that the audio should keep going so we can get through a bunch of chapters this week since we're behind. So the previous week when we were broadcasting from the North Woods of Michigan, our power went out right in the middle of the chapter that is the town hose story. So that's chapter 54. So just to catch people back up on what was going on. Oh no, our stream dropped again. Okay, here we go. Just to catch people back up on what was going on. Ishmael, years after the events of Moby Dick, is telling a story that they heard about the ship, the Town Ho, but further details of which he learned later. So he's in Lima telling this story to some of his Spanish friends, and so we stopped in the middle of it. But kind of where we left off is there's this guy, Steelkit, who's a mate on the ship who was a lakeman. He grew up around the Great Lakes and so had that sort of sailing tradition in him. The first mate, Radney, had offended him and been a real jerk. And so Steelkit started to drum up a mutiny, but not like a real mutiny, just in a like, we're not going to listen to this guy and we don't want to be punished because I attacked him because he was being a jerk. Oh, we're dropping frames like mad again. I'm going to keep going for a little while in the hopes that it'll stay up for an hour, but we'll see. If it doesn't get better in the next 15 minutes, I'm afraid I will abandon and try again next week. But in the meantime, so Steelkit got a bunch of people together, and then they were hiding out in one of the holds, essentially, so that they couldn't be punished. But gradually, all of his co-conspirators slowly gave themselves up, and then he was betrayed by a couple of canalers, so people who worked on the Erie Canal, and so then was captured. But before he was flogged, he said something to the captain that was threatening enough that he be released. So that's sort of where we left off. So we're going to pick back up now with the end of the Town Hose story and at least get through this today. So here we go. So Steelkit has just after dark that day, when one watch had retired below, a clamor was heard in the forecastle, and the two trembling traders running up besieged the cabin door, saying they durst not consort with the crew. Entreaties, cuffs, and kicks could not drive them back, so at their own instance they were put down in the ship's run for salvation. Still, no sign of mutiny reappeared among the rest. On the contrary, it seemed that mainly at Steelkit's instigation they had resolved to maintain the strictest peacefulness, obey all orders to the last, and, when the ship reached port, desert her in a body. But in order to ensure the speediest end to the voyage, they all agreed to another thing, namely, not to sing out for whales in case any should be discovered. For, spite of her leak, because the Town Ho was also taking on a lot of water, spite of her leak, in spite of all her other perils, the Town Ho still maintained her mastheads, and her captain was just as willing to lower for a fish that moment as on the day his craft first struck the cruising ground. And Radney, the mate, was quite ready to change his berth for a boat, and with his bandaged mouth, seek to gag in death the vital jaw of the whale. But though the lakeman had induced the seamen to adopt this sort of passiveness in their conduct, he kept his own counsel, at least till all was over, concerning his own proper and private revenge upon the man who had stung him in the ventricles of his heart. He was in Radney the chief mate's watch, and, as if the infatuated man sought to run more than halfway to meet his doom, after the scene at the rigging he insisted, against the express counsel of the captain, upon resuming the head of his watch at night. Upon this, and one or two other circumstances, Steelkit systematically built the plan of his revenge. During the night, Radney had an unseamanlike way of sitting on the bulwarks of the quarterdeck and leaning his arm upon the gunwale of the boat, which was hoisted up there, a little above the ship's side. In this attitude, it was well known, he sometimes dozed. There was a considerable vacancy between the boat and the ship, and down beneath this was the sea. Steelkit calculated his time, and found that his next trick at the helm would come round at 2 o'clock, in the morning of the 3rd day from that in which he had been betrayed. At his leisure, he employed the interval in braiding something very carefully in his watches below. "What are you making there?" said a shipmate. "What do you think?" "What does it look like?" "Like a lanyard for your bag, but it's an odd one, seems to me." "Yes, rather oddish," said the lakeman, holding it at arm's length before him, "but I think it will answer. Shipmate, I haven't enough twine. Have you any?" But there was none in the forecastle. "Then I must get some from old Rad," as he rose to go aft. "You don't mean to go begging to him?" said a sailor. "Why not? Do you think he won't do me a turn when it's to help himself in the end, shipmate?" And going to the mate, he looked at him quietly and asked him for some twine to mend his hammock. It was given him. Neither twine nor lanyard were seen again, but the next night an iron ball, closely netted, partly rolled from the pocket of his lakeman's monkey jacket as he was tucking the coat into his hammock for a pillow. 24 hours after, his trick at the silent helm, nigh to the man who was apt to doze over the grave, always ready to dug to the seaman's hand, that fatal hour was then to come, and in the foreordaining soul of Steelkit, the mate was already stark and stretched as a corpse, with his forehead crushed in. But, gentlemen, a fool saved the would-be murderer from the bloody deed he had planned. Yet complete revenge he had, and without being the avenger. For a mysterious fatality, heaven itself seemed to step in to take out of his hands into its own the damning thing he would have done. It was just between daybreak and sunrise of the morning of the 2nd day, when they were washing down the decks, that a stupid Tenerife man, drawing water in the main chains, all at once shouted, "There she rolls! There she rolls! Jesu, what a whale!" It was Moby Dick. "Moby Dick!" cried Don Sebastian. "St. Dominic! Sir Sailor, but do whales have christenings? Whom call you Moby Dick?" "A very white and famous and most deadly immortal monster, Don, but that would be too long a story." How?" cried all the young Spaniards crowding. "Nay, Dons, nay, I cannot rehearse that now. Let me get more into the air, sirs." The chicha, cried Don Pedro. "Our vigorous friend looks faint. Fill up his empty glass." "No need, gentlemen. One moment, and I proceed. Now, gentlemen, so suddenly perceiving the snowy whale within 50 yards of the ship, forgetful of the compact among the crew, in the excitement of the moment, the Tenerife man had instinctively and involuntarily lifted his voice for the monster, though for some little time past it had been plainly beheld from 3 sullen mastheads. All was now a frenzy. "The white whale! The white whale!" was the cry from captain, mates, and harpooneers, who, undeterred by fearful rumors, were all anxious to capture so famous and precious a fish. While the dogged crew eyed askance, and with curses, the appalling beauty of the vast milky mass that, lit up by a horizontal spangling sun, shifted and glistened like a living opal in the blue morning sea. Gentlemen, a strange fatality pervades the whole career of these events, as if verily mapped out before the world itself was charted. The mutineer was the bowsman of the mate, and when fast to a fish it was his duty to sit next to him, while Radney stood up with his lance in the prow and haul in or slacken the line at the word of command. Moreover, when the 4 boats were lowered, the mates got the start, and none howled more fiercely with delight than did Steelkit, as he strained at his oar. After a stiff pull, their harpooneer got fast, and, spear in hand, Radney sprang to the bow. He was always a furious man, it seems, in a boat. And now his bandage cry was to beach him on the whale's topmost back. Nothing loth, his bowsman hauled him up, and through a blinding foam that blent 2 whitenesses together, till of a sudden the boat struck as against a sunken ledge, and keeling over, spilled out the standing mate. The instant, as he fell on the whale's slippery back, the boat righted and was dashed aside by the swell, while Radney was tossed over into the sea on the other flank of the whale. He struck out through the spray, and for an instant was dimly seen through that veil, wildly seeking to remove himself from the eye of Moby Dick. But the whale rushed round in a sudden maelstrom, seized the swimmer between his jaws, and rearing high up with him, plunged headlong again and went down. Meantime, at the first tap on the boat's bottom, the lakeman had slackened the line, so as to drop astern from the whirlpool, calmly looking on. He thought his own thoughts. But a sudden, terrific downward jerking of the boat quickly brought his knife to the line. He cut it, and the whale was free, but at some distance, Moby Dick rose again, with some tatters of Radney's red woolen shirt caught in the teeth that had destroyed him. All 4 boats gave chase again, but the whale eluded them, and finally wholly disappeared. In good time, the town-ho reached her port, a savage, solitary place, where no civilized creature resided. There, headed by the lakeman, all but 5 or 6 of the foremast men deliberately deserted among the palms, eventually, as it turned out, seizing a large double war canoe of the savages and setting sail for some other harbor. The ship's company being reduced to but a handful, the captain called upon the islanders to assist him in the laborious business of heaving down the ship to stop the leak. But to such unresting vigilance over their dangerous allies was this small band of whites necessitated, both by day and by night, and so extreme was the hard work they underwent, that upon the vessel being ready again for sea, they were in such a weakened condition that the captain durst not put off with them in so heavy a vessel. After taking counsel with his officers, he anchored the ship as far offshore as possible, loaded and ran out his 2 cannon from the bows, stacked his muskets on the poop, and, warning the islanders not to approach the ship at their peril, took 1 man with him, and setting the sail of his best whaleboat, steered straight before the wind for Tahiti, 500 miles distant, to procure a reinforcement for his crew. On the 4th day of the sail, a large canoe was descried, which seemed to have touched at a low isle of corals. He steered away from it, but the savage craft bore down on him, and soon the voice of Steelkit hailed him to heave to, or he would run him under water. The captain presented a pistol. With 1 foot on each prow of the yoked war canoes, the lakeman laughed him to scorn, assuring him that if the pistol so much as clicked in the lock, he would bury him in bubbles and foam. "What do you want of me?" cried the captain. "Where are you bound?" "And for what are you bound?" demanded Steelkit. "No lies." "I am bound to Tahiti for more men." "Very good. Let me board you a moment. I come in peace." With that, he leapt from the canoe, swam to the boat, and climbing the gunwale, stood face to face with the captain. "Cross your arms, sir. Throw back your head. Now repeat after me. As soon as Steelkit leaves me, I swear to beach this boat on yonder island and remain there 6 days. If I do not, may lightning strike me." "A pretty scholar," laughed the lakeman. "Adios, senor," and leaping into the sea, he swam back to his comrades. Watching the boat till it was fairly beached and drawn up to the roots of the coconut trees, Steelkit made sail again, and in due time arrived at Tahiti, his own place of destination. There, luck befriended him. 2 ships were about to sail for France, and were providentially in want of precisely that number of men which the sailor headed. They embarked, and so forever got the start of their former captain, had he been at all minded to work them legal retribution. Some 10 days after the French ships sailed, the whaleboat arrived, and the captain was forced to enlist some of the more civilized Tahitians who had been somewhat used to the sea. Chartering a small native schooner, he returned with them to his vessel, and, finding all right there, again resumed his cruisings. Where Steelkit now is, gentlemen, none know. But upon the island of Nantucket, the widow of Radney still turns to the sea, which refuses to give up its dead, still in dreams sees the awful white whale that destroyed him. "Are you through?" said Don Sebastian quietly. "I am, Don." "Then I entreat you, tell me, if to the best of your own convictions that your story is in substance really true. It is so passing wonderful. Did you get it from an unquestionable source? Bear with me if I seem to press." "Also bear with us all, Sir Sailor, for we all join in Don Sebastian's suit," cried the company with exceeding interest. "Is there a copy of the Holy Evangelist in the Golden Inn, gentlemen?" "Nay," said Don Sebastian, "but I know a worthy priest nearby, who will quickly procure one for me. I go for it, but are you well advised? This may grow too serious." "Will you be so good as to bring the priest also, Don?" "Though there are no auto da fes in Lima now," said one of the company to another, "I fear our sailor friend runs the risk of archiepiscopacy. Let us withdraw more out of the moonlight. I see no need of this." Excuse me for running after you, Don Sebastian, but may I also beg that you will be particular in procuring the largest sized evangelists you can? This is the priest. He brings you the evangelist, said Don Sebastian gravely, returning with a tall and solemn figure. Let me remove my hat. Now, venerable priest, further into the light and hold the holy book before me that I may touch it. So help me heaven, and on my honor, the story I have told ye, gentlemen, is in substance and its great items true. I know it to be true. It happened on this ball. I trod the ship. I knew the crew. I have seen and talked with Steelkit since the death of Radney. Chapter 55. On the Monstrous Pictures of Whales. I shall ere long paint to you, as well as one can without canvas, something like the true form of the whale as he actually appears to the eye of the whaleman, when in his own absolute body the whale is moored alongside the whale ship so that he can be fairly stepped upon there. It may be worthwhile, therefore, previously to advert those curious imaginary portraits of him which, even down to the present day, confidently challenge the faith of the landsman. It is time to set the world right in this matter by proving such pictures of the whale all wrong. It may be that the primal source of all these pictorial delusions will be found amongst the oldest Hindu, Egyptian, and Grecian sculptures. For ever since those inventive but unscrupulous times, when on the marble panellings of temples, the pedestals of statues, and on shields, medallions, cups, and coins, the dolphin was drawn in scales of chain armor like Saladin's, and a helmeted head like St. George's, ever since then has something of the same sort of license prevailed, not only in most popular pictures of the whale, but in many scientific presentations of him. Now, by all odds, the most ancient extant portrait, anyways, purporting to be the whale's, is to be found in the famous cavern pagoda of Elephanta in India. The Brahmins maintain that in the almost endless sculptures of that immemorial pagoda, all the trades and pursuits, every conceivable avocation of man, were prefigured ages before any of them actually came into being. No wonder, then, that in some of our noble profession of whaling should have been there shadowed forth. The Hindu whale referred to occurs in separate department of the wall, depicting the incarnation of Vishnu in the form of Leviathan, learnedly known